Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, July the 17th, 2024. So the conjunction between Mars and Uranus is breaking up, and Mars is certainly moving off Algol, but did it have any impact? For myself, my Uranus is at around 26 something Leo, so the Mars-Uranus conjunction was square my Uranus. Uranus is a collective planet. It's not particularly personal, even though it kind of sounds dramatic. As far as my experiences on Monday, well, it was a bit sad actually. I was taking my dog for a walk, and we encountered another dog, a small dog, and this dog was loose and was walking on the road, and I saw it going off into the distance, and I was concerned maybe me and my dog had scared it, and it had walked away from the location of its own home. And I tried to go after it, walked off a bit, then the dog went in the other direction, and so it was still trotting down the road, and I told someone, can something be done? And I think someone was going off in their car to maybe find this dog. Anyway, a few hours later, there was a picture on some local Facebook group or something like that, of a picture of this dog's collar, and it had been hit by a bus or a car, and it was dead, and it had been taken to the local vet. And so, that feels a bit mortifying for myself, this sort of feeling of, was I responsible for this dog's death in some way, or should I have done more? Was I guilty of some act of omission if I'd done something, if I hadn't done something? So I felt bad about that, and it was certainly a mortifying experience. And I suppose you could say with Mars conjunct Algol, that is a little bit mortifying, particularly with its Mars conjunct Uranus. There was an accident that did impact me sort of indirectly, but I think it sort of underlines this idea perhaps of mortification, because with Algol, Medusa turning someone to stone, just getting that sense of shock. Now, the other event happening on Monday, which was more of a collective and certainly a national event in the United States, was the pick of Trump. He made his vice presidential pick, and he chose JD Vance. And I think it's a good opportunity to look at JD Vance's horoscope, and that's my main theme for this video. I'm not saying it's a particularly satisfactory experience looking at JD Vance's horoscope, simply because we don't have a time of birth. I just don't feel that I really am able to get into this chart. I mean, you can see how it might be a good chart, how this might be someone who is pretty intelligent and has got many different skills. But at the same time, I just feel that something is missing because we do not have a time of birth. Maybe at some stage his time of birth will emerge. But still, I will be doing my best to look at JD Vance's horoscope and what was going on for him at the time he was nominated, and looking ahead to firstly the presidential election. And possibly there is another event we need to consider, which I will be looking at, which may or may not be relevant to JD Vance, and that is the inauguration. So the inauguration is on the 20th of January 2025. Now, will this be the inauguration of Trump as president? Will it not be? I kind of feel that I've missed my chance. I've never in these videos made a prediction about who is going to win the presidential election. I just never got a chart, and I was particularly thinking about horary charts. I never got a chart, and I said to myself, where I could say to myself, "That's it. Trump's going to win. Trump's going to lose." Now, with the last election, the 2020 election, I got a clean horary showing that Trump was going to lose. That was never in any doubt, but I never got that chart. And now it's too late, because this is an astrology channel. This is not a politics channel. You're not interested in my political judgment about who I think is going to win. Yeah, sure, who do I think is going to win based on non-astrology? Yeah, I think that Trump's going to win, but I'm not basing that on anything astrological. So that is not an astrological prediction. I'm just using common sense. Right now, it would seem that everything is running in Trump's favor. I suspect that things will be running in his favor, certainly until just before the election. I think it's sort of end of September. There is, in his Indian chart, there is a dasha change. I'm not going to look at it today. I have looked at it before. Not quite sure how it's going to go. That might be a change of fortune for him. But from what we know, again, not astrologically, it does seem that Trump is going to win. But that is a political judgment, and I've missed my chance to make a clear astrological forecast. If I were to say, astrologically, I think Trump's going to win, well, you'd just be saying, well, I've just looked at what's going on with the assassination, and I'd just be, as I said, making a political judgment, which I would be. So yes, I haven't really made an astrological prediction, and I'm not going to make an astrological prediction about who is going to win this election. But still, I will be looking at the inauguration chart on January the 20th, 2025, and it is quite possible that Trump will be inaugurated, and as it stands right now, it does seem likely that Trump will be inaugurated on January the 20th, 2025. Okay, so before I look at JD Vance's horoscope, I firstly want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, July the 17th, 2024. There, top right, that is JD Vance. And there is the chart for today. I've set things for noon in New York. And you can see that the moon has moved into Sagittarius. So wherever you are, pretty much that's where the moon is. Technically, the moon moves into Sagittarius at 2:25 a.m. in London. So Americas, Europe, Africa, the moon is in Sagittarius all day. If you are in Australia or New Zealand, then you're going to have the moon in Scorpio approximately for the first half of the day. So that there may be a Scorpio feel to the day to begin with, if you are in Australia or New Zealand or Eastern Asia, if you're in Vladivostok, for example. The day might start off as being quite sort of intense and perhaps a little bit emotional, the emphasis on feelings, but then the moon will change sign. But for most of us, yeah, it is a moon in Sagittarius day. And actually, there isn't a great deal going on. We've had this drama of Mars conjunct Uranus, and sure, that conjunction is still there. I mean, it's something we still need to watch out for. We're not over it yet, but it is breaking up. So the moon goes into Sagittarius, it is in Sagittarius, it makes a trine to Venus, and it makes an opposition to Jupiter. And really, those are the main exact aspects happening today. So moon trine Venus in fire signs, I would have thought that is quite a nice aspect. It's quite fortunate, it's exciting, it allows us to get attention, and we just get a sense that we understand what's going on, because moon and Venus, they're both in fire signs. So fire signs are about intuition. And so perhaps we get a sense of which people we want to be with, which people to trust. But Venus in Leo, Moon in Sagittarius, there's just that sense of excitement that things are happening, and we can perhaps enjoy other people's company, but without having to get too emotional about it. Yeah, I know that the Sun is still in Cancer, but the emotional content of the times we're living in, the short-term times we're living in, is going down. Yeah, okay, the Sun is in Cancer, the Saturn is in Pisces, but things are less emotional now. And if you look at the overall planetary picture, we've now got 3 personal planets in fire signs. We've got Moon in Sagittarius, and we've got Mercury and Venus in Leo. So in general, the emphasis is on intuition in the Jungian sense of the word. Intuition being about not having to spend ages and ages trying to make up our mind. Just instantly just feeling it, just knowing it. It's quite clear what is the case. We don't have to analyze it. No need for that at all. And it's just about knowing. It moves beyond faith. We don't have to have faith. We can just have knowledge, and that is what intuition is about. It's making fast decisions. Fast decisions. I mean, I don't know. It was said about the Second World War German General von Manstein, who I think was a Sagittarius, that when he made military decisions, he was supposed to be a military genius. He made his decisions very, very quickly, and that would be a Sagittarian thing to do, a very fiery thing to say. It just becomes obvious. Moon is opposition Jupiter. That opposition late in the day, especially in the Americas, it could be a little bit excessive. That's only one thing we perhaps have to say about that. There's a certain sense of exaggeration. Just taking things too far, going over the top, responding emotionally in perhaps an excitable way, but in a way that doesn't know when to stop. So a little bit of limitation might not be such a bad idea. Otherwise, there could be problems. And just remember that tomorrow, Thursday, the Moon will be making a square to Saturn, kind of. So the Moon, having made that opposition to Jupiter, will move on to the square of Saturn. Then I suppose square of Saturn might be having to deal with the consequences of perhaps being a little bit irresponsible when the Moon is opposition Jupiter. But let's not worry about that at the moment. In terms of fixed stars, now, as I've said, Mars is moving off Algol. I don't think we need to worry so much about Mars being on Algol at the moment. But Uranus is still there. I think that Uranus is now at noon New York is only 7 arc minutes from Algol. So don't think that Algol's entirely gone away, because Uranus is still very much there. So that is something to consider. Also, the Sun at 25 Cancer is on the fixed star Procyon. Procyon is technically, I believe, Alpha. In other words, it's on this star. What's it? Alpha. Let me just tell you this. Alpha of Canis Minoris. So Canis Minoris is, of course, the lesser dog, and Procyon is Alpha Canis Minoris. It's the brightest star in this constellation of the lesser dog. Now, Procyon it's called Procyon because apparently, according to Robson, that means before the dog. So in other words, Procyon, according to this, would, before the dog, in allusion to its rising before Sirius. That's what, because Sirius is, of course, the dog star. So that's what Robson says. And it's a kind of a mixed picture. It can be about honor and prestige, but at the same time, according to Robson, it gives activity, violence, sudden and violent malevolence, sudden preferment by exertion, elevation ending in disaster, danger of dog bites and hydrophobia. My encounter with the dog was, by the way, on Monday, so that was 2 days before the sun was on Procyon. So sun was not on Procyon on Monday. And hydrophobia makes its natives petulant, saucy, giddy, weak-natured, timid, unfortunate, proud, easily angered, careless, and violent. And it gives 2 examples of dog bites. A male born 14th of September died from a bite of a dog. Sirius was in square to the moon. Male born July the 6th, 1885, bitten in the leg by a dog and was not expected to live. And so, you can see there is a dog issue here. And conjunct the sun, which is what we have here, great help from friends, gifts and legacies if not afflicted, military preferment after great struggles and expense. So that gives an idea. It can make us very strong with sun conjunct Procyon. We can achieve great things, but there might be a cost, and we might push things too far. Now, Ebertin and Hoffman in Fixed Stars and Their Interpretation, he talks about Procyon, and he says that, or they say, makes people hasty, jealous, and pig-headed, but it also confers willpower and ability to put thoughts and plans into action. According to tradition, there's also a tendency to hot temper and impudence. Enterprises created in haste, therefore, do not last. People who want to go through the wall with their head only cause injury to themselves. So it can be fortunate, provided we get it right. But I think that there is a danger of hastiness, and I suppose given what Robson has been said with the sun conjunct Procyon, I suppose we have to be a little careful about dog bites. Now, as continuing on the theme of accidents, just a reminder, it's true that Mars and Uranus, that conjunction is breaking up, but it's still there. They are less than 1.5 degrees apart. So everything I say about Mars-Uranus recently, it still applies. I do think Mars and Uranus, the conjunction has passed peak now, but still we could expect unexpected events, things we hadn't planned for. And so it's not a time for taking risks. Turning to the heliocentric picture, here we are. So we have got Venus square Uranus, and we had Venus square Uranus yesterday, but it's still there. Remember, this is from the point of view of the Sun being centre of the solar system. Venus square Uranus. Things can happen in relationships. We shouldn't take it for granted that everything is going to run smoothly, especially as we've still got Mars conjunct Uranus geocentrically. In terms of money and aesthetics, we should perhaps consider the possibility that there might be surprises, so we shouldn't take things for granted. Perhaps if we're trying to create something beautiful, it might not quite work out as we expect. So in that department, a little bit of caution might be required. Then we have got a conjunction between Mars and Chiron. Remember, this is a heliocentric conjunction between Mars and Chiron, not a geocentric conjunction. So with this conjunction between Mars and Chiron, some of us really are going to want to play the maverick. We're going to want to use our energy in a way that doesn't quite fit other people's expectations. Remember, Chiron is a maverick. Its discoverer, Charles Cowell, talking about its orbit, described it as being a maverick because it's a highly elliptical orbit. And so that's how we can experience Mars conjunct Chiron. It may be us, it may be other people, just behaving in an unusual way, really trying hard to be different. We don't want to do the normal things. We want to come over as real individuals, for better or for worse. Now, Chiron is also a very humanitarian influence, and it can be, as we know, connected with the wounded healer. So you could say Mars conjunct Chiron, perhaps we feel we need to put a lot of energy into healing. Maybe someone needs healing. And I'm not advocating that we do anything clinical there. I'm talking more about psychological healing, unless you happen to be a doctor, a physician. In that case, sure, then that's what you do, or a nurse. But for most of us, if we get any opportunities to healing, it's probably more perhaps psychological, but nothing clinical. Seeing if anyone is in trouble, needs help. That's somewhere in which we can, it's a place we can put our energy. And of course, you can link the healing and being the maverick, perhaps going out of our way to heal. Healing in a situation where other people might regard that as being inadvisable. So that is another dimension of the Mars conjunct Chiron. Now, this Mars conjunct Chiron is in turn aspected by Mercury, by quincunx. So there's Mercury. Heliocentric Mercury at 19 Scorpio is making a quincunx to Mars and Chiron. So there is Mercury, perhaps representing the mind, and Mercury is kind of getting challenged. We are perhaps being mentally challenged to do things differently. It's like Mercury is minding its own business, wants a quiet life, and then Mercury realizes, hold on, there's something I need to do. That's perhaps how we feel. There's something we need to do. And it won't go away. It's like an obligation, perhaps an obligation to behave in a way that attracts attention. It might also be an obligation to make the world a better place, or even the obligation to be a healer, to do something to heal someone's wound. If there's a right, if there's a wrong, we may feel an obligation to make it right. So that quincunx between Mercury and Mars and the Mars Chiron conjunction could be quite a significant influence over the course of the day. Now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So let me put that back into the geocentric mode. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, July the 17th, 2024. Aries, you are feeling, I think, a whole lot better. It just feels that the environment you're in is just so much more sympathetic and is much more in keeping with who you are. Yeah, and this is because the moon is has moved out of Scorpio, or if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it's moving out of Scorpio and into Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a fire sign, like Aries. And so you just feel that there is more variety, less stress, and you can be yourself without having to apologize, without having to take risks. And when I say risks, I'm thinking more about social risks. You know, you do something and you're afraid, are you going to get criticism? Is there going to be a clash? Are you going to feel emotionally restrained? And, you know, that was a problem perhaps with Moon in Scorpio. You perhaps felt you weren't able to give it everything you've got. But now with Moon in Sagittarius, making a trine to Venus, you're able to be yourself and just create for yourself excitement and variety. And you're going to find that other people are just going to be so much more sympathetic to who you are, and that they're going to recognize you as an individual, as a unique individual. And I do think that your creativity is going to be on peak form, but at the same time, other people's creativity is also going to be at the top of a range. So perhaps you can benefit from another person's cleverness and their individuality. And as far as relationships are concerned, I think that it can be a great day because, you know, Moon trine Venus, that's really nice. And that Moon trine Venus, because you've got Moon in Sagittarius, which is kind of making a trine to the sign Aries, which is your sign, Venus in Leo making a trine to Aries, which is your sign. So you've got these Moon and Venus both trining Aries. So you've kind of got a grand trine formation. In fact, you have got a grand trine in fire signs if you count the North Node, because Moon is making a trine to the North Node, Venus is making a trine to the North Node. So that means it's almost your obligation to enjoy yourself and to have fun. You know, whatever you're doing, there's no excuse to be bored. And there's no excuse to just think that now is not the right time. You know, sure, there's never quite a right time, but, you know, whatever you're doing, whatever you've got on your mind, perhaps now is the time to do it. And I think you really know what needs to be done. Now, having said all that, I just should remind you that the conjunction between Mars and Uranus, which was exact on Monday, it's still there. It hasn't gone away. And so, sure, be free, have a great time, but that's not an excuse to take risks. There can be something of a risk taker to every Aries. It's not a time for taking risks. You don't have to take risks. You don't have to take risks to enjoy yourself. If you do take risks, if you indulge in dangerous activities, yes, still, things could go wrong. So there's just no need, absolutely no need. And, you know, Mars conjunct Uranus, perhaps it's saying, you know, still it's in Taurus. Be a little bit careful with money. Don't take risks with money. Don't put yourself in a position where there could be a financial loss. If you're dealing with, I don't know, expensive appliances, don't take risks with these appliances. What you don't want to do is break something because you don't fully know how to work it. You're in a hurry, and so don't get caught in that way. You know, have a little bit of self-awareness because you do not want to be taking any risks, either in a sort of a personal or financial sense. One final thing to say is that from a heliocentric view, as I was just discussing, there is a conjunction between Mars and Chiron. And I think you might feel this conjunction between Mars and Chiron. In one sense, Aries, you're not going to want to follow the crowd. You're going to want to do things your way. And you may want to be something of a maverick, having an approach which is very individual, that could be somewhat shocking and surprising. I suppose that kind of links also with Mars conjunct Uranus geocentrically. Mars conjunct Uranus doesn't like to do things the usual way. So that's one aspect of Mars conjunct Chiron heliocentrically. Now, don't do something differently just for the sake of it. If you want to do something differently, do it for a good reason, because you have got a unique view of the world. And also Mars conjunct Chiron, it's about healing. Maybe you have an opportunity to help someone. Someone might be in trouble. Someone might be feeling sorry for themselves. And if you put a bit of energy in that direction, I think that you can make a big difference. Taurus. You do understand, Taurus, that nothing is entirely light, that there are certain things that do have to be taken seriously. And that does mean that you need to be aware of the emotional dimension. You know, sometimes Taurians can be just a little bit blunt, and they can just focus on surface impressions and just not consider the possibility that there are deeper emotions going on underneath the material surface. So today, I think that you have no choice but to accept the fact that there are things going on under the surface, that you have to make the effort to understand what is happening. And so do show some sensitivity and some subtlety. You know, Taurus can be an incredibly unsubtle sign when it wants to be. It can spoil the magic with one word. Taurians can do that. You know, everyone's just in a particular place. Everything's fine. People are on the same wavelength. And then suddenly Taurus says something. It's like breaking a vase or breaking a glass. There's that shattering, and that it's that shattering bluntness that Taurians are actually capable of. So be aware of your capacity for shattering bluntness. Now, of course, it's possible that shattering bluntness is required if you feel you're in a situation where other people are in a false bubble of self-satisfaction. And sure, then I suppose drop the glass, shatter that bubble. But in most cases, it's probably not the right thing to do. And in fact, Taurus, I think you can actually just benefit by going with the flow. The moon is making a trine to Venus, and Venus is, of course, your ruler. It's a very nice trine, that moon trine Venus. You can just, if you want, you can just be yourself. Be just satisfied wherever you are, perhaps in your home, somewhere you feel comfortable, and you can just go with the flow, and you don't actually have to think about the future. You don't have to worry about it. You can just let it all happen and just relax. And that may be just all there is to it. And so, Taurus, in a way, it's a day where you just feel that you're not quite in tune with what's happening. That might be because there are a lot of planets in fire signs, and Taurus is certainly not a fire sign. You got Moon in Sagittarius, Mercury in Leo, Venus in Leo. And because at first you might be uncomfortable, that might be the thing encouraging you to be blunt, because you're not comfortable, so you have to say something, you have to do something in a way to change, to create change around you. But that change may not be the right thing to do. It may just be to try to understand what's happening, and just to try, if you possibly can to just go with the flow and to try to just make yourself comfortable. And then you'll be making other people's comfort comfortable. But don't disturb other people's comfort, just for the sake of it. I think that would be a bad thing to do. And talking about disruption, there is still this Mars conjunct Uranus in Taurus. It's breaking up, but it's still there. And I suppose you could say that Mars conjunct Uranus may be encouraging you to get attention, to do something different. That is certainly possible. And also, from a heliocentric perspective, we have got Venus square Uranus. Remember, heliocentric, not geocentric. We've got Venus square Uranus. So that heliocentric Venus square Uranus just might encourage you to create waves, to just do something that's blunt, to just break the flow. But I just don't think that's the right thing to do in most cases. You won't be making yourself popular. So perhaps you should just accept the world as it is and consider the possibility that you can be excited by this world. And you don't necessarily need other people's input to be excited. It may be, Taurus, that you can make discoveries if you're prepared to go under the surface, to go perhaps deep into yourself and your unconscious and perhaps your spirituality, and be ready to deal internally with big spiritual and even emotional issues, the issues of life and death, birth and rebirth, these kind of issues. And if you could kind of really get into it and you're really prepared to dig deep, you might find something really amazing. And there can be this inner excitement, this sense that you are actually in the right place after all. Gemini, you have a serious streak to you. I think Taurus had a fairly serious streak to it, but Gemini as well. I mean, Gemini can overthink things, and I think that at the moment, Gemini, you're perhaps somewhat aware of your own limitations. Now, these limitations may be imagined. In fact, to an extent, I think they really are imagined. But you nonetheless might feel that there are just certain things that you can't do. You'd like to do them, but you can't. And that might make you feel ever so slightly frustrated. And perhaps the issue is that you realize that if you want to get anything done, you may need outside assistance, and perhaps you're not really feeling comfortable about asking for help, getting that outside assistance. And that may be because the moon has now moved into Sagittarius, or at least is moving into Sagittarius. And of course, Sagittarius is your opposite sign, a sign very much connected with other people, with relationships. And you do understand the sense in which you are reliant. Yeah, you'd like to be self-reliant, but you're not self-reliant. You do, to an extent, rely on other people and what they do and what they don't do. And so that could make you feel a little bit helpless, but there needs to be limits to that helplessness. You don't want to just have the assumption that it's all someone else's fault. You are a free agent, even though the moon is in Sagittarius. If something isn't to your liking, then it's up to you to make the change. And at the same time, don't discount your own ability to have an influence on others. You know, the moon may be in Sagittarius, but it is also trine Venus. And that moon trine Venus is really very nice from a Gemini view. You're able to communicate very well. You can say what's on your mind once you try. And at the same time, in the way you communicate, you can be interesting. And it's always important for Geminis to be interesting. You know, the worst insult you can possibly give to a Gemini is to say that they're boring. And I'm saying that as a Gemini. So you can be interesting today. And because you're interesting, you know, people will pay you attention. And so don't think that other people are a roadblock for you. They're not. They just have to be dealt with in the right way, and perhaps you just have to talk to them in the right way. And I think that's very important. Then if you can do that, then you'll find that things start moving. But on a more profound level, there is a challenge, I think, that you have to deal with. And I think that this challenge can be seen when we look at the heliocentric charts. So what we have heliocentrically is that Mercury in heliocentric Scorpio, I understand that geocentrically it's in Leo, but heliocentrically Mercury is in Scorpio, is making a quincunx aspect, 150-degree aspect to Mars and Chiron, because there's a Mars-Chiron, heliocentric Mars-Chiron conjunction today. And because of that quincunx, you are going to be challenged. You're going to feel that your line of least resistance is just to, I suppose, be yourself, have your usual thoughts, your usual Gemini routines, but there's something that needs to be done. There's something you don't want to do, but you feel a sense of obligation, and it just won't go away. Okay, sure, it will go away if you wait until tomorrow, but right now it's not going away. And it is about something you are supposed to be doing, I think, in order to maybe help someone. That's one possibility, that help is required, and you shouldn't just assume that it's all sorted out, that someone's got everything under control. You maybe need to intervene, or at least ask someone if they're okay, whether they need any help. That's one possibility. Another possibility with this challenge, you may be being challenged to show the world that you are different, that you do not agree. And I know Geminis can often like to be contrary, but I don't think today you really want to be contrary, but you may feel that you perhaps have to be contrary. You know, it's very nice to have consensus, but consensus is, I don't think, a particularly good thing. And if you're a Gemini, for sure, you don't think that consensus is a good thing. And maybe you have to do something today to break the consensus, to show the world that things can be done differently. And just because everyone agrees on something doesn't mean that it is the right course of action. Cancer. The moon moving into Sagittarius. I mean, that does matter if you're a Cancerian, because the moon is your ruler, and we need to know what the moon is doing. And with the moon moving into Sagittarius, you do understand that you can't be all things to all people. You can't be in lots of different places at once. You might like to be in lots of different places at once, but really that is basically not possible. And you perhaps have to decide where you want to put your energy with Moon moving into Sagittarius. I think there is actually pressure to scatter your energy because you have to address lots of different issues. Perhaps there are lots of different pressures, and you feel that you've got to try to cope with them all, but you can't. That is not possible. And I think, as a Cancerian, I think that you should recognize that, and I think you can recognize that, and you need to consider, what is important and what does matter. Now, this Moon in Sagittarius is actually making a grand trine. Grand trine is when we've got planets in all of the fire signs. So we have got Moon in, and of course making trine aspects. So we've got Moon in Sagittarius making a trine to Venus in Leo. The Moon is also making a trine to the North Node in Aries. And Venus is making a trine to the North Node in Aries. Okay, I know the North Node, you could say, well, it's not a planet, but I think we have to look for grand trines where we can find them, and I think there really is a grand trine happening at the moment. And so, Cancer, it's just a good idea to consider what matters, where you can best use your energy. Just one area, it's just one day, it's just a Wednesday. There's a limit to what you can achieve in one Wednesday. So concentrate on the thing that matters to you, and you will be amazed about how quickly things flow, and things will move faster from your feelings. Feelings can move quickly, but emotions, feelings, they're not the fastest element. The fastest element is fire, because fire is about something happening instantaneously. And so with the Moon making this grand trine in fire, things can happen absolutely instantaneously. It's perhaps about awareness. You just see it. You understand it. It's absolutely clear. And you don't even need, the relative slowness of your emotional responses to understand what's happening. Now, this could actually be very materialistic, even though the grand trine is in fire signs. You just might have a total understanding of what you want to do, how you want to get what you need to get, perhaps in a financial sense, maybe in a power sense. It will all just fit together. And if you have ambitions, which I certainly hope you do, right now every Cancerian should have a clear set of ambitions, and I think it will be very obvious to you how you can achieve these ambitions, and also who is required. You don't have to do everything on your own. Who is needed? And that is because the Moon is trine Venus, and Venus is a planet connected with relationships, can be connected with other people. So you can bring all your resources together, and really something very powerful can come out of it. So at first, Cancer, it might feel itself to be a day where you just feel like, I don't know, a crab out of water. It just doesn't feel like your kind of day. But once you actually start to engage with the day, then you'll realize that actually you are in tune with things. And it's perhaps about moving beyond your feelings, transcending feelings and moving into the instantaneousness of your intuition about what actually needs to be done and what you can do. And in the process, you don't have to be alone. Moon trine Venus, that really does suggest that someone is out there, people are out there you can enjoy their company and you can benefit from their company, perhaps in a financial sense. Leo, the Sun is conjunct the fixed star Procyon, and with this conjunction, you don't want to be too hasty. We were looking at what Eberton and Vivian Robson were saying about the Sun conjunct Procyon, or at least about this fixed star Procyon in general. And there is a certain tendency here to perhaps be hasty. And if you are hasty, I think you could get yourself into trouble. You may feel that it's just necessary for things to happen really quickly. You want things to happen quickly. You're in a hurry to make things happen, perhaps. But if you are in a hurry, Leo, then things could go wrong very quickly. Very quickly. And all your careful plans could just be wrecked. But really, this is so unnecessary. If you understand your limitations, but you also understand what can be achieved, and you get that balance right, then I think over the course of the day you can be quite successful. In fact, perhaps very successful, and you may actually be helped by the fact that we've still got this conjunction going on between Mars and Uranus. Now, this conjunction, I've talked about how negative it can be, but this Mars conjunct Uranus, it is in Taurus, which in a Leo chart is, it's a high-profile sign. And so you have a clear sense of your own ambitions and what you want to achieve, and you are a little bit impatient, but that impatience does have to be curbed. If you give yourself enough time, then you can be original. But just because you're being original doesn't mean that you have to be completely disruptive. In fact, you should avoid being disruptive, and perhaps you just need to take things to the point of disruption. So if you want things to happen and you feel that the people around you are being a bit sluggish, sure, you can up the pace, you can increase the temperature, but you have to know when to stop. Because if you just take things too far, a little bit too far, then that is, when the problems can start. But I'm probably being a little bit too judgmental about today, because things are moving. Leo is a fire sign. Venus is in Leo. Mercury is in Leo. That is something to celebrate. Okay, Mercury and Venus stay in Leo for a few weeks, or they have been in for a few weeks, because I think at the end of the month Mercury moves into Virgo. But right now Mercury and Venus are in Leo, and the moon is now in Sagittarius. And so moon in Sagittarius is making a trine to Venus, and moon is also making a trine to the North Node. So we've got this grand trine in fire, and you are a fire sign. So Leo, you can actually get a great sense of satisfaction. Just a feeling that maybe you are in the right place. And if you're in the right place, you don't have to make a fuss. And what you have to do is just, once you realize you're in the right place, just make the most of everything that's available, because so much is available. And the most important resource is you and your many talents, your completely raw creativity. It's there, and you can actually make it happen, and you can be impressive with it. You can be impressive without having to show off, and you're certainly helped by the fact that the moon is trine Venus. You know how to get people's attention, but again, you don't have to shout. You don't have to do anything dramatic to get people's attention. That attention is just going to be forthcoming without you having to try. And you're the kind of person that people want to have around with all this fire. It's quite a fiery day after all. When it's a fiery day with Moon, Mercury, Venus in fire signs, you can get people's attention and get people's support, but without having to make a performance. I understand that Leos are performers or can be performers, but you don't need to have an exaggerated performance. Just be yourself and illuminate your little part of the world, and you will be greatly appreciated. Virgo, don't be overly negative. It's not really called for, but still, there may be a temptation, Virgo, to be a little bit negative, to look at what can't be done rather than what can be done. I understand, Virgo, that as a sign, you are realistic. You don't go for flights of fantasy, and you are certainly aware of other people's limitations, and you're aware of your own limitations. But today you might be tempted to exaggerate these limitations, to think, actually, there's nothing that can be done, so there's no point in trying. So how do you deal with that? Well, I would suggest that you try to be constructive about it. It's quite possible that you have, to an extent, accurately defined some of the limitations upon you. But where there has been an accuracy problem might be that you've assumed that just because there's a limitation doesn't mean that it means you've assumed that nothing can be done about it. It's just the way it is. But it's not the way it is. If you have highlighted a limitation, something which is preventing you from doing what you want to do, then you may well be in a position to actually deal with the limitation and to untangle it. And untangling may be just what you need to do. Being caught up in knots, maybe knots relating to your imagination, maybe knots relating to previous mistakes, but whatever it is, just being caught up with these knots. And then what you have to do when you're caught up in knots is you need to untie the knots. And I'm actually very confident that you are going to be able to untie the knots, and then to be able to work out, what to do and how to go about it. And I think that maybe what's going on at the moment, Virgo, is that although Virgo has a reputation for being quite a security-orientated sign, it's just possible that your anchor may have slipped. Anchoring is always important, and you'd anchored yourself to a place and you thought you had everything under control, but while you haven't been looking, that anchor has slipped. It's not there anymore, and you're drifting a little, and maybe you've just become too focused on external demands. There are a lot of external demands, things you have to do, people you have to please, obligations, places you have to be, and you've been dealing with all of these external demands, and in the process you may have been forgetting about yourself. And I think this process may have actually been going on for some time, maybe a period of months, but I think now it's becoming a bit clear that you don't have proper anchoring, and you do need to anchor yourself. And I think that's something you can do. And it may be that you have to put your foot down. There may be pressure in one particular department. There may be actually one particular person who is bothering you, who is pressurizing you to do something. And this pressure is just symbolic of the whole issue. And so perhaps you need to decide that this is a moment where you need to be assertive, gently assertive, and make it clear where your limitations are and where your boundaries are. And yes, sure, I know that Virgo is a service-orientated sign, supposedly. There's a sign that's always there for other people and sometimes isn't there for itself. And I think you do need to be there for yourself. And I think that you can make it clear today with the moon in Sagittarius that you matter. And perhaps you shouldn't mince your words, but say it as it is. Don't exaggerate. Perhaps just explain, using as few words as possible, what matters to you and what is important to you. And fundamentally that you need to find your own space. And on a material sense, it just might mean that your home and your boundaries, where you live, where you feel comfortable, that all of that is very important. And once you've defined your space, then everything moves. Then you can start benefiting from, for example, the moon trine Venus. Moon trine Venus, moon trine the North Node. That's all about comfort, but comfort on your terms, not on anyone else's terms. Making yourself feel comfortable, secure, and most importantly, at home. Libra. Things are really starting to move. There is a grand trine in fire signs. The moon is trine Venus, the moon is trine the North Node, Venus is trine the North Node, and Venus is your ruler. And so with this grand trine in fire signs, as I said, things are starting to move, and you can be yourself, and at the same time you don't have to be satisfied with second best, and you can reach out and find a way of being which is both satisfying and exciting. And there might also be a sense that recently things may have been a little bit stuck, but I do think that those blockages, whatever they might be, are really starting to move. So it's just very important that you're able to take advantage of the situation, and at the same time your use of words can be very effective. You can say things that immediately get people's attention, things that perhaps come out of the blue, and through the element of surprise you can get an extra advantage. And that's also actually shown by the heliocentric picture, because from a heliocentric view we have got Venus, your ruler, square Uranus. And okay, it could be a little bit tense, that Venus square Uranus. You may have the capacity to make people tense, but sometimes that's a good thing, because when people are tense, it means that you're having an impact. And who's going to relieve that tension? Well, it's going to be you. You're the person that can actually make things happen. Now, that could be difficult at first sight, because perhaps being a Libra, you might feel that you don't want to rock the boat. You want everything to be harmonious and well balanced, but maybe not. Maybe that's not the right approach. You have to be yourself. In fact, you're supposed to be yourself. We're all supposed to be ourselves, aren't we? But you in particular, right now, that's what you should be doing. And you need to be yourself in such a way that the world recognizes what you are doing. It's no good being yourself in your own private little world, because humans are social animals, and Librans in particular are social animals. You need to be yourself in such a way that it is recognized and understood, and that people understand what you're trying to do, what you're trying to offer, what you're trying to claim, and fundamentally, most importantly, who you actually are. So Libra, I would have said it's a day when really you shouldn't be holding back, and you should be prepared perhaps to take a few social risks. I mean, I'm not talking about material risks, by the way. Mars is still making a conjunction to Uranus. This is not a time to be taking physical material risks, but I think it is a time where you could be taking a few social risks, where you don't entirely know how other people are going to respond, but however they respond, it's all for the best. And of course, if someone responds badly to you and doesn't like the message you're putting out, well, you're just being given information, aren't you? Really, you can't be friends with everyone, can you? I mean, some people might just not like you. They might not get on with you. They might not appreciate who you are. But Libra, appreciation really does matter. It's important. And if people don't appreciate you, then, well, too bad. Though I think overall, it is a time when your social horizons should be increasing, or rather they can be increasing. It is a time to be making new friends. So if you do something which loses you a friend, you can gain 2 more friends, because, I don't know, you do something and some people don't like what you're doing and they fall by the wayside, but other people just think it's great. So don't be afraid, Libra, about being an individual. I think that is tremendously important. Though, when considering other people, you just don't forget about that Mars conjunct Uranus. Mars is ruler of Aries, which is your opposite sign. So with Mars conjunct Uranus, there's still the possibility that someone who should know better does something that is stupid or perhaps unacceptable or is unplanned, and you could just find it annoying and disruptive and perhaps justifiably annoying. But it's still important that you get some perspective on things. You must be prepared with Mars conjunct Uranus for other people to behave unreasonably, or even to behave dangerously. And if someone is behaving dangerously, you need to be aware of this. Don't assume that anyone knows what they're doing. I think you know what you're doing by and large, but in terms of other people, not everyone knows what they're doing. And if you believe that someone doesn't know what they're doing, then chances are you're right. And then you have to take the necessary action. I don't know, if you're a passenger in a car and the car is being driven at 100 miles an hour, then clearly something is wrong and you need to get out of the car when the car has stopped, of course. But think of the symbolism there. It's not necessarily you being driven in a car that's going 100 miles an hour. Perhaps it's an event or a situation that is perhaps going too fast because someone else is being irresponsible. Though I don't want to read too much into that Mars conjunct Uranus, because that Mars conjunct Uranus peaked on Monday. Okay, you could say Tuesday in some respects, when the moon was opposition Mars and Uranus, but the influence of that Mars-Uranus conjunction and the disruptiveness of that Mars-Uranus conjunction is starting to dissipate. And I don't think you should be focusing too much on it. I think you should instead be focusing on what you can do about possibilities rather than restrictions. So be positive today and just take advantage of the highly energetic astrological environment, which can perhaps propel you to new heights. Scorpio. I've talked a lot about the conjunction between Mars and Uranus, and at times I've given warnings about it. And this conjunction between Mars and Uranus is starting to dissipate now. So I think that for Scorpios, the situation is probably not as dangerous as it was over the last on Monday or Tuesday, but things are settling down, and you may be getting a sense of stability. And it's not just the Mars conjunct Uranus breaking up, it's the fact that Mars, your ruler, is moving off the fixed star Algol. And Algol can be a difficult influence. Looking at the comments, some people have had problems with Algol. Algol has created difficult experiences. But yeah, Mars is moving off Algol. And so you can perhaps afford to relax more, but not entirely. There's still scope for things going wrong if you are careless. You don't want to be careless. Well, you should never be careless, but it's just another day when you basically should not be taking any risks, particularly physical risks. So I did have to get that warning out of the way. In terms of the benefits of the day, I think that from a financial view, I think it can be actually quite a good day. Money is always difficult to find, isn't it? It's never easy. But today you have a certain intuition about where the money is and about where it is possible perhaps to make extra money or to just take action to put yourself in a better financial position. I think you just know. And you know what to do now, you know what not to do. And so if you have that intuition, then do take advantage of it. It's useful information, and once you get that understanding, then if you don't do anything, well, you won't be taking advantage of the opportunities. But it is becoming clear, and I think it's going to be especially clear if you happen to be working, if you're in a job, career, business, all that kind of stuff, because the moon is making a really nice aspect to Venus, and with that moon trine Venus, I think that you're going to be able to articulate your needs very well, and you're going to be you're going to be able to tell people, whether they are your employers or if you're in a position of responsibility, authority, the people who you are hiring or people who you employ or people who are under you. You're going to be able to explain things to them without having to use too many words. Remember, it's moon trine Venus. Moon trine Venus is not about loads of words. It's just about a demonstration. And in fact, it seems that through your social skills and perhaps through your charisma, you can put yourself into a situation where there are financial benefits, where you can, I suppose, maybe enrich yourself or put yourself in a situation where you can benefit from another person's actions. So financially, if you're well organized, but also brave and upfront, because I think the social dimension is important, then I think that there are things you can do to make things better for yourself. In terms of the heliocentric picture, Mars is conjunct Chiron, and that conjunction between Mars and Chiron could very well have an impact on you. You know, Mars is your ruler, and it is conjunct Chiron. And so if you have, with this Mars conjunct Chiron, you may feel a certain sense of obligation, that there is something you have to do, and this something may be outside your normal routine. In fact, probably is outside your normal routine. So you might have plans for the day. You might have even micro-organized your day. But even then, it may be necessary to take a detour. That's what Mars and the Mars-Uranus conjunction is asking you to do. Or it may seem like a detour, but it may actually be a fundamental part of who you are. It's part of your orbit. Remember, Chiron has an elliptical orbit. You might think, as Chiron does weird things in space, that it's on a detour, but it's not. It's just running itself. It's running its orbit according to particular algorithms. It's inevitable. We know what Chiron is going to be doing in 500 years' time, I assume. So it's all part of who you are. And your own ability to be a maverick, to be someone different, is part of who you are. And so do make that space to express yourself, to do something different, to do something that no one expects, because it's something that is necessary. And in the process, if other people can benefit, so much the better. I mean, for example, you may have to take a detour because someone's in trouble, someone needs help, someone needs advice. It may not be what anyone expects, but it's just something that you know it is expected of you. And so try to take advantage of that Mars conjunct Chiron. And I think whatever your motivation, it's about you as an individual not being constrained by social norms. Sagittarius. Moon is now in Sagittarius, your sign. It's great. And the moon is, not just in Sagittarius, it's making a trine to Venus. And moon is also making a trine to the North Node. So we have a grand trine in fire signs. And that should make it a day where you feel that things are finally moving. And, recently, many Sagittarians, I think, have felt rather stuck. And it didn't help when the moon was moving through Scorpio. Scorpio just wasn't quite your sign. But now that the moon is in Sagittarius, you can feel the movement, and your intuitive faculties are on absolutely brilliant form. You just know everything. When I say know everything, it means you just know how the world works. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to explain it. It's just clear. And at some level, you are in tune with higher cosmic forces. And these higher cosmic forces, they are informing you and they are guiding you. And it's almost a non-verbal process. You just know how it's all working, and you are just comfortable with the world in which you're living. And if you're not feeling comfortable with the way the world is, you know what the issue is, and you know what changes are required. And I think that you're in a position to be able to make those changes. But it's important, Sagittarius, not to believe that you've got all the answers. Now, Sagittarius is a Jupiter-ruled sign, And although Jupiter Sagittarius does have a great reputation for being, freedom loving and being respectful of other people's need for variety, although it has that reputation, every Sagittarius has a moralistic streak. They have a sense of what is right and wrong. And that's because Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is a very moral planet. And so with Moon trine Venus, the challenge here is to persuade yourself that you haven't necessarily got all the answers, especially from a moral perspective. You might think that it's very easy to understand the world in a moral sense because you have a sense of right and wrong. I think every Sagittarius does have a clear sense of right or wrong, even if they deny it. I think all this idea that Sagittarius is a freedom-loving, libertine kind of sign is not entirely correct. I think the right and wrong does underlie the Sagittarian view. And so you need to just consider the possibility that you haven't necessarily got all the philosophical answers, that some of your ideas about what are right and wrong need to be changed a bit. And it's all about being honest with yourself. You have been aware that something isn't right for a long time, but it hasn't actually clicked. But I think now it is beginning to click. And so it might just be a time when some Sagittarians just have this revelation that in terms of maybe religious, maybe philosophical, maybe political, but just something needs to change, that something needs to move, that you need to just accept that there's no such thing as a static philosophy, and you do have to take into account changes in the world, and of course you are impacted by what is happening in the world. And so don't worry about changing some of your beliefs. You don't have to change all your beliefs, it's just some of them, or maybe just one belief needs to be reconsidered. Though I'm not saying that you should be entirely focused on what other people believe. In fact, you shouldn't be. It's a time, Sagittarius, when you need to consider your own destiny and your own path, and your path is different from other people's paths. And still, it's easy, isn't it, to listen to what other people are saying, listen to what your friends are saying, your peer group, peer pressure. It's easy, but it's not the right thing to do at the moment, because right now it should be all about you. You get support for sure from the world around you. You might even get some feedback from the world around you, especially about some of your beliefs and your philosophies, and that feedback, you understand it. It's been a long time coming, but you know that a few things have to change. But you're not changing the way you believe, what you believe in, to please another person. That's not what you're doing. That's not what it's about. It's about changing what you believe because it is the right thing for you to do in terms of your understanding of the world. And so it's all part of the creative process. And so you make these changes as part of the creative process, and then it's all very natural. And I think that you reach a stage where you are able to actually tell people about the conclusions you've come to in a way that is just honest and frank and unapologetic. It might feel a bit risky because you might get criticism. People might think you're crazy, but actually it's probably okay to just be honest and open about the way you are and what you believe and what you want to happen next. And I think if people respect you, they'll also appreciate what you're doing and what you're saying. Capricorn, you do have a certain emotional power today. I think you've had this emotional power for the last couple of days. It's not immediately obvious, but when people get close to you, if they stay close to you, then it just becomes increasingly clear that you can make things happen, and that you can even get people to change their minds if you feel that's important. And once people get close to you, they kind of find it a bit difficult to leave. There's something a bit compulsive about you right now. I suppose people feel that you're maybe filling in some kind of gap for them, that you're somehow important, that you've got something to say, you've got something to offer. And in a way that's nice, but on the other hand, I don't think that today you're especially interested in where you stand in terms of your social environment. I don't think you feel that you necessarily need other people. I think that you can be pretty self-sufficient. But that doesn't mean to say that there aren't people out there who can benefit from you and you can benefit from them. I mean, after all, the moon is making a trine to Venus. Venus is quite a sociable sign. And so with moon trine Venus, you can benefit from other people's company. But it very much has to be on your terms. And it's not socializing which is mindless or unfocused. Yeah, mindless, unfocused socializing is just not something, Capricorn, that you are interested in. You probably feel that you want to be with people for a reason, or because you genuinely appreciate them. And I don't mean appreciate them in some superficial sense. It's because you really, really understand them and you appreciate them, and you feel that you and them can benefit from each other's company. But it's nothing trivial about it, and it's a situation where relationships do need to be taken seriously. If light relationships which are frivolous and trivial, they're not going to work out today. You're simply not interested. From the perspective of the world out there, compared to your private world, we all have that distinction, don't we? There's your private world, it's your space, and you can contrast it with the opposite, which is the world that you don't have full control of. Perhaps also, though, the world you aspire to, the world you're trying to have an influence on, but it's not really you. But I think that you kind of know that it's important, but if you spend too much time trying to project yourself out there, for example, in terms of your career, if you were to just project yourself and try to get noticed, try to be an authority figure, without really thinking about why you're doing what you're doing, there's just going to be a certain sense of dissatisfaction. You may make progress, you may be appreciated, but there's something hollow about it. What is the point? And I think what this means is that if you are engaging in activities relating to status, career, business, advancement in general. It's not really a time to be going through the motions, just doing it because that's what you're supposed to be doing. You actually have to think very hard about what you are doing, and you need some deep thinking, deep thought about why you are doing what you're doing. What is the purpose? And also, you maybe need to reconsider the power dynamic. There's always a power dynamic, and I suppose that is the advantage about staying at home and doing nothing, because very often when you're at home doing nothing, particularly if you don't have family members to deal with, there is not a power dynamic. But as soon as you go out there into the outside world, power issues become apparent, and that's what you're thinking about. That's what you're feeling, and you need to perhaps renegotiate those power dynamics. And that renegotiation may actually start at home. It may start in terms of your own thoughts and your own feelings, and in fact your own calculations. You are actually quite calculating today, and I don't mean calculating in a negative sense. When you just sit down, think about a problem, not necessarily a mathematical problem, it can actually be a social problem, a problem maybe relating to your work or your business, how you handle other people. When you actually sit down and focus on the problem and you don't get any disturbance, then things will start to clarify, and you'll start to have a greater sense of how best to handle the situation. And by handling a situation, it's not about short-term benefits or short-term escapes. It's about thinking about things in a more long-term sense. What is it all about? And there's this question of why. So in that sense, Capricorn, it could be quite a complicated day, but maybe also quite a satisfying day, because it's a day when you can get to grips with some quite fundamental problems which you've perhaps been battling with for quite a long time, maybe weeks, maybe months, could even be years. But some of the solutions should start becoming available. So I think today could be useful, but it's just important that you have a sense of your own boundaries, and that you do probably accept that your best work is probably going to be done on your own, or perhaps in the company of one other person who you really trust. That is possible. And in relationships, it's kind of a similar picture. It's not a time for getting cluttered with people who you don't fully respect. Maybe they don't respect you as well. Just as few people as possible, one or two people who you're on their wavelength and you have an understanding. You all both perhaps have an understanding. If it's you and one other person, maybe there's a couple of people, but you all have to be on the same emotional wavelength and have the same priorities. And that's how you need to handle today. Aquarius, you're pretty sociable today, I would have said, and I think you want to be sociable. You understand that there are people out there who like you, and now is perhaps a time to make it clear that you're ready to interact. And I think it's just important that you don't make things too complicated. That can be an issue sometimes with Aquarians. They can overcomplicate things, but you can't entirely predict how anyone else is going to behave, and I think you have to take people as they are. They may or may not be useful, but you have to give everyone a chance. And if you're prepared to give everyone a chance, then I think there is the possibility that you can be pleasantly surprised by the eventual result. So other people matter, and other people can just make your day more interesting, and at the same time, don't underestimate your own power. You do have quite a strong charisma at the moment if you decide to use it. I think it feels like you can be quite intense if you want to be, but it's not the kind of intensity that puts people off. I think it's the kind of intensity that actually people find to be quite fascinating. So perhaps, Aquarius, you should really try to put yourself in the center of things and allow people to just naturally be attracted towards you, and just see what happens next. Though at the same time, Aquarius, it's a good idea to think about what it's all for, and perhaps you want to reevaluate some of your ambitions. Maybe you've achieved your ambitions, you're halfway towards achieving some ambitions, but still there is this question about why you're doing what you're doing, and how permanent are your ambitions. Some ambitions, they are lifelong, because they're real, because they are part of who you are. But other ambitions may be more temporary. They may last for a week. You might achieve the ambition, you might not, but still at a certain point you move on. And so it's a kind of a sort of a surface ambition. So you perhaps have to make a distinction between what is temporary and what is just really part of you. And it may just be a distinction between the sacred and the profane. Things that are sacred to you, these sacred abilities and goals that you have that are there for you forever. Then the profane are things that are basically of not much consequence, that take it or leave it. Profane is perhaps the wrong word, but they're not sacred to you, and they can be compromised and negotiated. I should finally say something about relationships. Venus and Mercury are moving through Leo, which is your opposite sign, and so in general this is a time when relationships are perhaps more important than usual, and you do want to give people the opportunity to be themselves and also to have an impact on you, and that's okay, especially now with Mercury and Venus moving through Leo. And in fact, don't forget, in just 5 days' time, the Sun will be moving into Leo, your opposite sign, and so arguably relationships are going to become even more important. But the Sun is important also because it is the ruler of your 7th house. It's ruler of Leo. And the Sun is on this fixed star Procyon. And so with the Sun on the fixed star Procyon, that may say something about other people's behavior. And there may be people who are ambitious for sure, but also quite hasty. They want results in a hurry. And if people want results in a hurry, they could fall flat on their face, or worse. So try to monitor the people around you and try to monitor the kind of vibes they're giving. Do they sound as if they're under pressure? Are they just being too hasty for their own good? And if you feel that someone is being too hasty, you may feel that also that you need to intervene. You maybe need to calm someone down, try to get someone to have patience, especially if that person is important to you, and or you feel that they are in a position where they could cause damage. So do consider the possibility, Aquarius, that you can be a restraining influence. Pisces, you have got things to say, and I don't think you're going to mince your words, actually. If something is important to you, then Pisces, you're just going to say it. And I think that's absolutely right. And in the way you express yourself, it's just important to really just keep it simple. You can probably get your meaning across in just a few words. In fact, it's probably the case that the more words you use, the less effective you'll be. So don't beat around the bush. Make it clear. Make it absolutely clear what you want, what you intend, and I think that you will get an immediate and favourable reaction. And you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is trine Venus. The moon is in Sagittarius. Sagittarius, as you know, is a high-profile sign from a Pisces viewpoint. It gets attention. You know how to project yourself, and that moon is being trine Venus means you can project yourself very well in terms of other people, and also you can project what you want to happen. So, Pisces, if you are in a position of authority or control, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, or in terms of some other project that you're engaged in, and if you're in a position of control or authority, you can get people to do things your way. And actually, at the moment, you probably have a pretty good sense of how things should be organized. It's just a natural, intuitive sense of a way things should be. And with that moon trine Venus, I'm thinking that you can, for example, explain to people the way you'd like things to be, and they will listen to you. And in general, I think they will just follow instructions. So that means if you're not happy with the world around you, then you can just tell people what's wrong, and also tell people what you would like to happen. And then I think that things will happen in the way you want them to happen. And so overall, I think that it's a day when you can have a really quite important and valuable impact on the world around you. And it's certainly not a day when I think you're going to be ignored. If you are ignored, well, that's probably your fault. Absolutely no reason to be ignored. You can really get noticed today. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at things from the perspective of the I Ching. And I should say that if you're enjoying this video, I would be really grateful if you were to like it, indicate that you like it. And if you're not subscribed, I would really appreciate if you were to subscribe. Last time I looked, I had 4,998 subscribers. I'd really quite like to get to the 5,000 and beyond. So yeah, if you could subscribe, if you're not subscribed, I really would appreciate that. Anyway, turning to the I Ching. I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was number 26, the taming power of the great. Now, what this hexagram is telling us is that we have a lot of power. No doubt about that. We're powerful people. There are a lot of things we can do. And that power, in fact, is fairly primal. It's there, and perhaps it's developed up to a point, and now things may be about to happen, that we're in the mood where we can really impose our will on the world and make an impact. At least that's the first impression. But this hexagram is warning us. Yes, we've got a lot of power, but how actually are we going to use it, and is it actually appropriate to use it? And so we have the concept of how do we actually control what we have. Now, one aspect of control is maybe considering our past, maybe our life, what's happened in the past, maybe even our familial and genetic heritage. What is the traditions of our family and our culture? And it's easy to be dismissive of it and to say, well, things move on, the world moves on. Things that used to be important in the past no longer matter. But just remember, this is the I Ching. The I Ching has a very Confucian approach. The past is something to be respected, and we also need to respect our own past. And perhaps it's a time when we need to think back about perhaps our own family traditions, the traditions of our society and our culture. And they might in some respects be taming us. Perhaps we need to start to consider the restraints of the past, rituals from the past, customs from the past, which are just easy to trash, but perhaps they are now becoming important and more relevant. So that gives us a general idea perhaps of what this hexagram is about. Now, we do have a moving line, and the line that moves is at the bottom. The bottom line moves, and the general advice here is, we are ready to take action, but it's not the right time. If we were to take action now, things could go wrong very quickly. That's the first point to make. Now, this hexagram, the taming power of the great, and it's almost saying that we need to allow ourselves to be tamed. So we might be a wild animal, we might feel like a wild animal, but taming has its benefits. And so taming could be constrained. We need to perhaps, as I was just saying, we need to perhaps be constrained by our own traditions and our own past. Or if we're in a situation where there are people above us, authority figures, whether at work or at home, we should perhaps listen to their advice and listen to their wisdom. And if we're told that some piece of action is not appropriate, then we should say, well, yeah, they're probably right. So we can allow ourselves to be tamed, and it just might be the right thing to do, because we could be protecting ourselves from getting into trouble. And at the same time, people out there, they don't want us to get into trouble. They want the best for us. And so that's another reason why we should perhaps allow ourselves to be tamed. Now, because the bottom line is moving, we move to a different hexagram. So hexagram 26, the taming power of the great, it transitions to hexagram, don't panic, hexagram 18, illness. Now, on the surface, that sounds bad, but it's not meant to be bad. Illness, I think, is the term used by Greg Winkup in his translation of the I Ching. The Wilhelm translation describes it as working on what has been spoilt. So when we think about illness, there is the implication that it is an illness that can be healed. So we're not dealing with something that we're stuck with. So that's why we shouldn't really panic when we see the word illness. And so we tame ourselves and we restrict ourselves, and then we sort of realize that something is not right. That's why we need to restrict ourselves, that something needs to be healed, needs to be fixed. And again, that's it, as Wilhelm says, working on what has been spoiled, what has been spoiled. So this problem may be nothing to do with us. It could be the action of someone else, maybe in the past. At the beginning I talked about the past and how the past is important. And so looking at the past is perhaps where the problems have been created, and what we can do now with working on what has been spoiled or illness, we can fix them. So that's what we have to do. So taming power of the great, I said we've got to stop what we're doing. We can't advance any further. We can't use this energy that is building up in us right now, because it's not just that the situation isn't right, it's that there's something wrong, and we need to fix whatever it is, and we can fix it. And so it's an illness, but it's an illness that can certainly be healed, and that might be something to put our energy into. And perhaps that relates to the fact also that heliocentrically there is a conjunction between Mars and Chiron. Remember, it's a heliocentric Chiron, a heliocentric conjunction, not a geocentric conjunction. So with that conjunction between Mars and Chiron, heliocentrically, we can perhaps put energy into self-healing, fixing the problem that needs to be fixed, and then we have this great power, and perhaps that power no longer has to be tamed, and then we can really start to achieve our full potential. And now I want to think about JD Vance, who is Donald Trump's vice presidential pick. So I must warn you that I do not have his time of birth. When you haven't got time of birth, it's a bit difficult to really get into the chart. It's just a bit unsatisfying, and I'm just hoping that at some stage we will get his time of birth. But here is JD Vance's horoscope. So I get it. So he was born on August the 2nd, 1984. And he's a Leo. And he has got moon in Libra. Although we don't know his time of birth, we can be sure that his moon really is in Libra. And he was born, I've set his chart for noon in Middletown in Ohio. And Sun works well in Leo. I know it's very simple, it's a real simplification, but all things being equal, actually, the Sun is at its best in Leo. The Leo is a sign where the Sun works really well. So, and that is particularly the case if it's in a male chart, because the Sun is a male planet, and so in a man's chart you should really be focusing on the Sun. And so Sun in Leo gives someone the opportunity to really be someone special. So that's great. He's got the Sun in Leo. I suppose Obama had the Sun in Leo. You know, whatever you think of Obama, he was a very successful politician, even though he had very little experience. Okay, he was successful. I'm not sure he was a particularly good president. I think he was. I think he didn't. He wasn't experienced enough. He just didn't have the understanding of political power. But still, I think the Sun in Leo got Obama a long way. And JD Vance has the Sun square Saturn. Now, I don't know to what extent that Sun square Saturn is a problem or whether it's an advantage. I mean, Sun square Saturn can make someone very focused and very disciplined. So it can certainly be useful. By the way, there are roadworks or something's going on out there, so my apologies about the noise. So that Sun square Saturn does give a lot of discipline, a lot of control. Someone who is hardworking and who can achieve a great deal. That's one way you could look at Sun square Saturn. Another way of looking at it is someone who's got major restrictions, things holding him back. So far, we don't see much holding him back. I mean, he's 39 years old. He's a senator. You look at his biography. He's Harvard, was it Yale Law School, and he's a senator, and he's written a New York Times best-selling book called Hillbilly Elegy. So everything has worked very well in his life, as far as I could see, at least on the surface. And he came from, I think, quite a humble background. And I think that was what his book, Hillbilly Elegy, was about. And so maybe that Sun square Saturn is just about him being able to just work really hard and achieve a lot of results. But, we just don't know for sure because we don't have his time of birth. If we had the time of birth, we would get a much better idea about how that Sun-Saturn square is working. Additionally, we have his Mercury in Virgo. That's a nice Mercury in Virgo. It's nice that Mercury in Virgo is in a different sign from his Sun, because when you've got the Sun and Mercury in different signs, that often creates a certain amount of objectivity, being able to see things differently, not being just caught up in the crowd, not being blinded by information that is irrelevant. We can create some objectivity there with Mercury in Virgo, and so I think that is a nice Mercury, though his Mercury is square Uranus. Clearly there are things he says that can grab people's attention, and he says things that maybe he later regrets. Of course, he's being widely reported the fact that, I don't know, I think in 2016 or something, he said he's not a Trump person, and he said negative things about Trump in the past. But I think that always happens in politics, doesn't it? Particularly in American politics. You say something bad about something or something negative about something, and then you have to change your approach. It's like George Bush Sr. and Ronald Reagan. They were vying for the Republican nomination in 1980, and of course they had to, George Bush Sr. was saying negative things about Reagan, and then he had to accept the inevitable and become Reagan's vice presidential candidate. So there is that Mercury-Uranus square, which is interesting. Jupiter in Capricorn. Now, Jupiter in Capricorn is a bit of a generational planet. I mean, it stays in a sign, all things being equal, for about a year. So everyone born in a year will also have the Jupiter in Capricorn. So, they can't always, you can't. It's a bit general and generic. But I suppose when you become a politician, when you become a senior politician, maybe that Jupiter in Capricorn starts to become more important. Jupiter does not actually work too well in Capricorn because Jupiter is supposed to be the big vision. But then you have Capricorn, which is about the earth. It's very materialistic. It's all about ambition. And Jupiter and Capricorn people can be a little bit mean and selfish, and they're always thinking about themselves. And that can be a Jupiter in Capricorn feature. Margaret Thatcher had Jupiter in Capricorn. Adolf Hitler had Jupiter in Capricorn. But I suppose there are uses in Jupiter in Capricorn. It's very focused on material things. It's rather like Moon in Capricorn. But Jupiter, it's fallen. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, so therefore it's fallen in Capricorn. And you'll notice that he's got Mercury is trine Jupiter. So you can see that is good. I mean, he's written this book, Hillbilly Elegy. From what I've seen of his speeches and when he comments to and he talks to people, he's a pretty effective communicator. I think that seems to me to be quite clear. So those are a few thoughts about his natal chart. I'm sure there's a lot more to say. Then I want to consider the chart for his nomination. So he was nominated on Monday, and I got this time from The Guardian. They're quite good about times. I mean, maybe this chart is wrong, but this is the moment he was nominated. I think we knew he was going to be the vice presidential pick beforehand, but I think this is the official nomination moment. And do notice the fact that Mars-Uranus conjunction is on the descendant. So the question is, how do we read that? Now, we could say Mars-Uranus, even though it's on Algol, is just about like a big event. It's a big surprise. This is a big happening. So Mars-Uranus is angular. So, okay, this is just telling us what we already know. Trump has got his vice presidential pick, and that's it. And we needn't worry about it too much. But as an event, Mars-Uranus conjunction, this is quite a powerful signature. It's quite a dangerous signature for the nomination chart. This may tell us something about how the presidential campaign is going to continue. It may indicate that JD Vance, because of this nomination, himself may be in danger from some attack or assassination attempt with the Mars-Uranus conjunction at the time of the assassination. Nomination, not assassination, at the time of his nomination. Then the Moon. The Moon has just moved out of the Via Combusta. So the Moon is, Via Combusta ends at Venus at 15 Scorpio. Moon is at 1516 Scorpio. So that's kind of a bit fortuitous, with this sense that things are sort of returning to normal, maybe. Things aren't quite so unstable, but still Moon is making a square to Mercury. I'm not saying that this nomination chart is great. Moon is making a trine to Saturn, which is good. Possibly making a trine to the part of fortune, assuming this time for 4:05 p.m. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin is correct. So there's that Moon trine the part of fortune, and Moon trine Saturn. So and Moon is in the 12th. I'm not entirely convinced by that nomination chart. It's not great, but really, does it matter? And as far as what's happening as far as JD Vance is concerned, I mean, does it in terms of transits, I didn't see any spectacular transits for JD Vance at the time of his nomination. The moon is conjunct his Mars-Saturn midpoint. I don't know about that. How does he feel about it? I mean, Mars-Saturn is... by the way, he's got Mars in Scorpio. I forgot to say that. That's very nice having Mars in Scorpio. Mars rules Scorpio, so that, he's a strong person. I think, we don't know his time of birth, but I think that sort of adds to the feeling that, that Trump has picked quite a powerful person to be his vice presidential pick. And so moon on the Mars-Saturn midpoint is, I would have said, it's a bit difficult. I think that may be about his private concerns, his family's private concerns, his wife. He's married to he's married to a lawyer. She's, I think, of Indian cultural heritage, and she's a real star performer. But anyway, that may be about her concerns. It's a dangerous time to be a politician in America, as Donald Trump has already found to his cost. And of course, we've got this situation where we have this stochastic terrorism, people on both sides increasing the chances of a terrorist act through their rhetoric. And I'm sure Vance is going to be very much the victim of this rhetoric. So I think that he does have to be careful there. That's an extra hint that, we haven't necessarily seen the end of assassination attempts here. I'm not predicting he's going to be the victim of an assassination attempt, but he does have to be careful, I would have said. There's not a great deal else going on in terms of his transits. Nothing that I really wanted to say. There's his solar return. It's now with his solar return. Now the solar return, his solar return. Here's his solar return for 23. The solar return he is in. Remember, I don't have a time of birth, so there really is a limit to what I can say about this. What I find interesting is that Venus is at 26 Leo. So just remember that. Venus is at 26 Leo. And the Sun is square Jupiter. I don't know. I wouldn't read too much into that. Then looking at his solar return for 2024, Venus is still at 26 Leo. So this is his solar return coming up at his next birthday, at the beginning of next month. So Venus is still at 26 Leo. And Venus is square Uranus. Again, that might be a cause for concern. Uranus is still quite close to Algol, but Venus is square Uranus. So what's the big deal about Venus at 26 Leo in two successive solar return charts? Well, let's turn to Donald Trump's chart. Donald Trump has his Mars at 26 Leo. He has his ascendant at 29 Leo. So it's interesting that JD Vance's solar return Venus is conjunct Trump's Mars for two solar returns in a row. Now, that just might indicate to us that there is a connection between him and Trump. And if we look at the connection between, if we look at the synastry between JD Vance and Trump, let me get this one. Here it is. So we've got Trump in the middle, and we've got JD Vance on the outer wheel. So JD Vance has his Venus at 23. His natal Venus is at 28, 23 Leo. his 2 solar return Leos were both at 26 Leo. So his natal Venus is on Trump's Mars, and also pretty close to Trump's ascendant. So from a positive perspective, you could say that JD Vance's Venus is somehow calming Trump down. He's having a sort of perhaps a positive influence on him. Maybe in terms of communicating with Trump, he can help to smooth out some of Trump's rough edges. So that is one possibility of the way that Venus is working. Now, there are a few problems here. JD Vance has a strong Mars at 22 degrees 37 Scorpio. And that Mars at 2237 Scorpio is right on JD Vance's IC. So 24 Scorpio is Trump's most private point in his chart, could also represent his family. And that Mars conjunct the IC, there is scope here for JD Vance annoying Trump and his family getting annoyed with JD Vance. I don't know when that's going to start to manifest. It might not manifest until if Trump gets elected. It might not manifest until he becomes president. But there is an area there where I think a little bit of caution might be required. There are some other things going on here. His sun is on his sun in Leo is on Trump's Pluto. So in a way, that Pluto represents Trump's generation. So here is this man from a particular generation born in 1946 who perhaps JD Vance is somehow attracted towards, he gets pulled towards. So that's a possible way in which it's working. So those are a few thoughts about the chart there. Then I suppose we have to think about the election, and what's happening to JD Vance at the time of the election. So the election is presidential elections. Here's the election. I don't know. I've just gone for 11 p.m. Forget this. This is, I suppose, when the results are coming out on November the 5th, 2025. So what kind of experience is he having at the time of the election? Mercury's on his south node. I'm not saying that's necessarily particularly bad, but perhaps there's a hint there that maybe it's all too easy for JD Vance. Maybe if you're into reincarnation, maybe in the past he was a leader and it's just easy for him perhaps to take on a position of leadership. So, I mean, that may be how it works. The sun is picking up the moon. So remember, the moon at the time that JD Vance was inaugurated, got the nomination, was at 15 Scorpio. The sun is approaching 15 Scorpio here. So the sun is picking up the inauguration moon. And that could be a good thing, but on the other hand, the inauguration moon is on JD Vance's Mars-Saturn midpoint. I don't know. So that's maybe a little bit of a negative. I mean, I'm not saying that one can predict the result of an election on the basis of his chart. The moon on the evening of the election result is around 6 degrees. So on the evening of the election, as the results are being declared, the moon will be at around 6 Capricorn. So it will be on JD Vance's Jupiter in Capricorn. I'd probably regard that as a plus. Jupiter is about him and where he wants to go and wanting to be vice president. The moon is on his Jupiter, so that maybe that does suggest good news for him. Then I wanted to look at the inauguration chart. Now, we don't know who is going to be inaugurated, but this is the inauguration chart. It is not anything like as dramatic as the Biden inauguration chart 4 years earlier. But Notice that the inauguration chart has a Venus-Saturn conjunction. That is a signature of the inauguration chart. The Sun in Aquarius on the midheaven in every inauguration chart since Truman's inauguration, whenever they shifted the inauguration from March back to January, whenever they did that, the Sun is always going to be in Aquarius on the midheaven, pretty much, and I think, unless there was some messing around with time zones. So Sun conjunct Pluto, Venus conjunct Saturn, Moon is square Mercury. I mean, it's okay, it's not great. Moon is opposition Chiron, square Mercury, but I wouldn't be too bothered. Mars is on the IC. So it's not great having Mars on the IC. I think that that does indicate that this presidency is, of course, going to have its own dramas. But again, nothing like as bad as it was when Biden was inaugurated. And this is how it all occurs to JD Vance. If it were to be the case that this is his inauguration as vice president, I don't know. I don't see anything particularly spectacular here. Nothing seriously comes to mind. But in terms of inaugurations with Trump, there are things going on. You see, Trump has a Venus-Saturn conjunction in his natal chart. And there is a Venus-Saturn conjunction in the inauguration chart. So does that mean that Trump is sort of working on a Venus-Saturn cycle? Because if you've got a conjunction in your chart, then you're going to be vulnerable to the Venus-Saturn cycle. You're going to be hit by the Venus-Saturn cycle. So that's probably quite important, the fact that we've got Venus-Saturn conjunction. You can read that both ways. Does this indicate him and a responsibility of a new term? Or does it indicate disappointment and resentment? Mars is on his Venus-Saturn midpoint. Mars is on his Venus. But we shouldn't get fooled by potentially by the negative impact of these signs. But it's a big responsibility if he were to be inaugurated president in January 2025. But as I said, I don't want to read too much into it. Finally, I want to look at JD Vance's solar arc directions. So with the solar arc directions, I did do his solar arc directions. So this is what we're doing. Here we are. Here are his solar arc directions. They're slow moving. Move 1 degree for every year. So he's coming up for 40. So these are the planets. You move all the planets 40 degrees. And so notice that his solar arc directed sun is at 19 Virgo. That means his progressed sun is at 19 Virgo. So right now, with Saturn at around 19 Pisces, he has got transiting Saturn opposition his progressed sun. And I would just see that as just about responsibility. The responsibility of being getting the nomination to be vice president. Additionally, the directed Pluto. So if we direct his Pluto, we see his directed Pluto is at 8 degrees Sagittarius. So his directed Pluto is aspecting very close to the conjunction of his Uranus, very close to the square of his Mercury. So he's got directed Pluto on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint, and that's what he's experiencing at the moment. Let's just give you an idea about what Reinhold Ebertin says about that. So Pluto on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. Let's see if this tells us anything useful. Pluto on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. A good mathematician. Indefatigability in one's work or creative activity, a hasty realization of plans, overstrained or overstimulated nerves. So he's got a lot of energy. He's got a lot of... he's maybe not getting much sleep at the moment, or not just at the moment, just right now. This is, I mean, just this whole period he's in. So he's got a huge amount of power at his disposal, but of course there's a danger that he might push it too far. But we have got the sense in which plans might be realized. And so sort of Vitta, let's see what Vitta says about this same aspect. Mercury, Uranus, Pluto on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. Vitta says, to readjust one's own thoughts suddenly, quick at repartee. So quick at repartee, that sounds as if he's up in a debate with Kamala Harris. I don't think Kamala Harris has got much of a chance, has she? Finally, his directed Mars. Solar arc directed Mars is at 1 degree 8 Capricorn, so that is on the Aries point, at least square the Aries point, on the solstice point. We don't know his exact time of birth, but I suppose we could say that as Mars has approached the solstice point, would have happened over the last year, he's just become incredibly prominent. And it's not, I think that Mars at 1 degree 8 Capricorn, it's not really talking specifically about his nomination as Trump's vice presidential pick, but it's just giving us a general idea about what's going on in his life at the moment. And that's it with JD Vance. I kind of feel that was all a bit unsatisfactory, and I think the problem is I do not have his time of birth, but I do think that JD Vance overall has a very strong chart. And you know what? There's actually one more chart I wanted to look at. I forgot. You know what it is, don't you? You can guess. You can guess what chart it is that I want to look at. It's one of my favourite charts. And the thing about JD Vance is that, you know, why I think that one good thing about the JD Vance pick is that JD Vance is not a neocon. I think it's good for world peace, the fact that JD Vance has been picked, you know, regardless of whatever else you think about his policies, because JD Vance is realistic. And JD Vance understands that America and NATO's war against Ukraine I think he understands that it's insane. And he understands that we should be looking for peace in Ukraine. And he understands that, and he's been quite brave about it. He's been prepared to stand up and say it, and I think it's really, in that sense, regardless of all his other policies, I think it's a really good pick that Trump has made in terms of his vice presidential candidate, because it's if you want world peace, you don't want a neocon as vice president. We don't want another Dick Cheney. So that is useful. So which made me think, well, how does JD Vance's chart fit with that of Ukraine? So here is my, where's Ukraine? I've got Ukraine's chart up here somewhere. There's Ukraine's chart. Looked at this chart a lot. So, and then we wanted to see, how does JD Vance occur to Ukraine? And just 2 things that come to mind. Firstly, JD Vance has his Saturn at 10 degrees 2 minutes Scorpio. So Saturn is on Ukraine's midheaven. So the midheaven is where Ukraine is moving, where Ukraine wants to go. I suppose it's its war efforts, it's what it's trying to do. And Saturn's on Ukraine's midheaven. And then have a look at Ukraine's Mars. Ukraine's Mars is at 25.5 Virgo. In other words, JD Vance's Saturn is not just conjunct Ukraine's midheaven, it's semi-square Ukraine's Mars. And so that may mean that perhaps because of JD Vance's influence, that may mean that we're going to see a diminution of arms supplies a military support once Trump becomes president. Perhaps. Although, now that JD Vance is the pick, he's got to be careful. He's got to watch out for stochastic terrorism. He's got to watch out, neocons, Democrats, I'm sure they'll be raising the temperature, trying to create a toxic environment. It works both ways. And of course, there's a question as how much will he be able to show his influence? Vice president doesn't necessarily have any power. So that is something to consider. Also, it does mean, of course, that with JD Vance as the vice presidential pick, the Biden regime will be throwing the kitchen, I would guess, will be throwing the kitchen sink at Ukraine in the next few months, especially if they're worried about Trump winning the election. But yeah, I think that from a Ukrainian perspective, looking at the two charts, I think that JD Vance's campaign, well, it's good news or bad news depending on your perspective. If Ukraine wants to stay in the war and wants to keep fighting Russia, then of course it's bad news. Of course, from a perspective of Ukrainian lives being saved in this war, throwing more Ukrainians into the meat grinder, having JD Vance, if maybe it's just a sign that this war has to come to an end, and whatever you think about Trump and Vance, they're more likely to bring peace in Ukraine than Biden and friends. I mean, I think, I don't know. I can't vote in the United States elections. I'm not an American citizen, but my standard view is, from a point of view of internal, America's internal welfare and so forth, and the environment in particular, it's probably better to have a Democrat in the White House. But from a perspective of world peace, I'm absolutely convinced that it's better to have Trump in the White House. So it kind of depends. If I had to vote, I've no idea who I'd vote for. Anyway, that really is it. Thanks very much for listening. I hope you find this video interesting. If you did enjoy this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be really super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.